Welcome to Chapter 3 in our AP Statistics. We're going to begin talking about scatter plots and correlation, but before we can get there, what we need to do is talk about the difference between an explanatory variable and a response variable. There's going to be quantitative variables, and we're going to get to the concept of correlation using scatter plots as we progress. So today, here is your standard. We're going to just answer the question of what's the difference between an explanatory variable and a response variable today, and we're going to see what difference that makes. So let's look at first, let's create our definitions. An explanatory variable helps explain or influence any changes in the response. So this is what is often called the independent variable elsewhere, but we're calling it the explanatory variable because that's what your AP Stat is going to be calling it. And then there's the response variable. The response variable measures an outcome of a study. So the explanatory variable has an effect on the response variable. Thus the names explanatory and response. A few things that we need to keep in mind. We are using these variables to create a scatter plot. And the scatter plot shows a relationship between two quantitative variables. So our explanatory and response variables are quantitative variables, and the relationship between those two will produce our scatter plot. A few rules about your scatter plot. Your explanatory variable is going to go on the x-axis, always, always, always. And then that means your response variable will be scaled on your y-axis. It's important to make sure that you scale the horizontal and vertical axes, and they must be uniform so that we can, if you don't use an appropriate scale and use that uniformity in your scaling, you're not going to be able to detect things that we're going to need to be detecting in the future. Also, something that we need to make sure that we are in the habit of doing, label your axes. Okay, so now that we've got these rules underway, let's move into looking at an example. So there's a paper written, cross-national relationship between sugar consumption and major depression, and it concluded that there was a relationship between refined sugar consumption in calories per day, and calories per person per day, and the annual rate of major depression. And that was cases per 100 people. And they gathered data from 6 countries, and they created a graph based on this data here. So I see that they have their 6 countries. This is the average sugar consumption. Again, this was in calories per person per day of sugar. And then this was the depression rate. And you can see as the rate of sugar consumption goes up, so does the depression rate. And I'm going to show you how to make a scatter plot with this, both by hand and in your calculator in class tomorrow. But what we should be seeing from this is your sugar consumption is being used to explain the depression rate. That means that the sugar consumption is going to be plotted along the x-axis, and the explanatory variable as an explanatory variable, and your response variable, which would be your depression rate, is going to be plotted along the y-axis. Okay? So let's look at a few situations and see if we can pick out which is the explanatory variable and which is the response variable. The amount of time a student spends studying for a statistics exam and the grade on the exam. Okay, well, the explanatory, the thing that is going to explain the response, is going to be the studying, the time spent studying, and the response is going to be the grade on the exam. And we hope this is going to be a positive relationship. More time spent studying, higher the grade. Then we look at the weight in kilograms and height in centimeters of a person. So we are looking to see the height explains the weight. Okay, I know it's listed reverse, but the weight is not going to indicate the height. However, the taller the person is, we believe that the weight is going to be increasing because the more height you have, the more weight you will have. Um, so that will be that relationship. Inches of rain in the growing season and the yield of corn in bushels per acre. The corn is going to be affected by the rain, so the rain is going to be your explanatory variable, and your yield of corn will be your response variable. Finally, looking at D, a family's income and the years of education their eldest child completes. Okay, this is looking to determine the relationship of, does a family's income have a relationship with the education level of the children. So um, the income would be used to explain the years of education that a child completes. Okay, that does it for today's introduction to explanatory and response variables. Again, tomorrow we're going to do some scatter plot from some information, and we're going to do a little bit of practice as we move forward with scatter plots and determining correlations. See you tomorrow in class, and bring your book. Bring your book to class. Bye.